Welcome in, Hawks fans. Your boy Bryce Lewis back at it again for another Believe in Hawks episode. And you know how we've been doing this offseason, continuing the Hawks coverage with a lot going on with the team. And I have another special guest with me today, Brett Usher. You may have seen him on Twitter. You know, he was big on the Jalen Johnson train this past year. If you guys hadn't missed that, guy who's has a wealth of knowledge of the love of the game of basketball as well. So appreciate you coming on, Brett. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great, man. As I said beforehand, it feels like a great time to talk Hawks. A lot going on. Definitely one of the most exciting moments in recent franchise history. And I appreciate you reaching out to me, man. Definitely looking forward to talking with you.
Yeah, definitely, man. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to come on, man. Like you said, there is a lot to talk about with this team. Obviously, the draft has ended, I think just a short while ago. So that has ended. But coming into today, I told you before the show that I had a different plan for the pod, and now we have to push that back a little bit because we have to talk about the most recent things that have gone on today. And the Atlanta Hawks, if some people don't know, have traded away A.J. Griffin to the Houston Rockets for the original pick was 44. Obviously, A.J. is a guy who had a very promising rookie year, had very efficient numbers. People in Atlanta were very excited about him. Then second year, had some stuff off the court. Quinn took over, kind of fell out of the rotation, and now it just felt like it was inevitable for him to get a fresh start. I don't know if you had an opinion about AJ coming out of Duke or what you've seen from his play, just to get your thoughts on the situation.
Yeah, I mean, to go back to when he was coming out of Duke, and I'm not a draft guy, but my concerns were really like health related with him, right? Like he had some significant injuries, but I was really impressed with his rookie season, like just his shot making ability. Just kind of his feel as an offensive player really kind of blew me away. I know I talked about it a lot on Twitter and stuff. And so it came as quite a surprise when he did essentially fall out of the rotation in his second year, just considering how young he is and what he showed as a rookie. Like, I'm surprised that, I don't know if there was a disconnect between how Quinn Snyder values him versus how the organization in general values him. But I'd like to think they're kind of on the same page. And that just came as a little bit of a surprise. But, they're a pretty deep team and stay healthy. He's a really, really fun, kind of unique player. He's kind of a throwback almost, just has this, he's a great shooter, obviously. But he's very strong physically. And he's got this just a really nice in-between game, his floaters, like his middies, just the fakes that he throws to get those shots off. He's really smart off ball. So just a really nice player. And looking forward to seeing what he does in Houston and from there.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I root for AJ. I want nothing but the best for him. I want him to be successful in Houston. Like you said, I mean, he was a guy who I think, it happens when you change coaches, you change coaching staff, you change schemes. What he was doing under Nate McMillan is different than what Quinn wanted him to do. I think obviously Nate had more of an ISO heavy offense, which allowed AJ to break guys down. And you can see that in between game where I think Quinn really just viewed him as a shooter, a spot up shooter at that. And so I think that kind of got him out of his rhythm a little bit. And then that just kind of, he was struggling, adjusting defensively as well to it. And I think that just eventually made it come to a decision where it's like, all right, he may just not fit with us anymore. And for a fresh start, may be best for both sides. So wish AJ Griffin the best there. But we also did get a second round pick. We thought we were done with the draft after that first pick, but no, we got a pick today. Then we traded technically up with Miami one spot to acquire Nikola
Juricic.
Yes, there you go. There you go. Right there. With the 43rd pick in the draft, a guy who has some upside, aggressive guy. Some people call him a microwave scorer. Just somebody who, you maybe put in G League, let him develop, maybe could become a rotational wing for you in the future, 6'7" guy. So, I know some people are going to look at like, oh, we traded AJ Griffin for him. And listen, at the end of the day, this is just part of their whole development process that they're trying to do in Atlanta, guys. So no reason to overreact. And, welcome to Atlanta, Nikola. We have a lot of Nikolas in the league now. So that is taking over the league right now for sure, man. But now let's get back to the first pick, Brett. And that's why I brought you on here. Risacher. It's the first pick in the NBA draft for the Atlanta Hawks. A lot of people in the Hawks community, let's be honest, a lot of them weren't excited. I think the majority of Hawks fans rather would have had Sarr, but at the same time, we know about the agent not wanting him to come to Atlanta and everything like that. He went to Washington, whatever. Risacher has been mocked to Atlanta number one the entire draft season. It's kind of funny. I felt like he was mocked to us a lot, but he didn't have a lot of momentum till leading up to the draft. Yeah. And now he's in Atlanta. Landry Fields came out in the presser and said, we feel like we got the best player in the draft. And a lot of guys had him 1-2 on the board. So I guess he may have been the best player in the draft. But I wanted to get your thoughts on Risacher as a player and his fit in Atlanta now, teaming up with Trae Young and Dejounte Murray as of right now.
Yeah, it wasn't the most exciting pick. I don't know what really would have been in this draft, though. I mean, there's just everybody's got a lot of holes. You know, like he's exciting. Like maybe he has more upside than Risacher. He probably does. Probably has a higher ceiling, I guess you could put it as. But he's pretty raw offensively. Like he's got a ways to go. Like he could have been a little bit frustrating. Like I'm not sure. You know, and again, I'm not a draft guy. So in terms of like where Risacher stands compared to the rest of the guys they could have taken, I just know that, you know, and I think that I speak for a lot of people, like nobody in this class really blew me away. You know, I'm not locked into the draft all year like a lot of these guys are that make all this great content. I just kind of casually consume their content and stuff, but usually a guy will jump out to me. I mean, like, you know, last year, obviously Wemby, but even like the Thompson twins, like, or the year before, like Chet, you know what I mean? Like I said, Paolo, like you saw those guys and it's like, ooh, that's a guy with star potential. And nothing jumped out to me like that in this draft. So like, I'm fine with it, but it almost feels like they drafted for fit based on the current construction of the team. Like that's kind of what they need is like a wing with size that can shoot the ball and defend. Like, so he, and you know, I don't know how much of an impact he's going to have. Like he just turned 19. So maybe we shouldn't get our hopes up too high for a rookie. For his rookie season, but it does kind of feel like they were looking at what do we need right now, and this guy is that. But at the same time, if they did decide to sort of tear things down and rebuild, like he's also the type of player that could fit in with pretty much any kind of team. Like, you know, that's the appeal of him, is that he's the type of guy that pretty much everybody wants. It's just like, is he going to be DeAndre Hunter, or is he going to be Mikal Bridges, or like MPJ with defense or something like that, like, which would be probably the high end for him. And if you get that type of player, great. I think in this draft, that's an awesome outcome. But I just don't think he screams superstar. And usually when we talk about the number one pick in the draft, 9 times out of 10, right, it's a guy where it's like he could be a superstar. And I think a lot of people probably just don't seem to see that with Risacher. But I don't think we should rule that out either. He's so young, and it's not like he can't develop some of that on-ball stuff that he's lacking right now. So it's a solid pick. Like, I think he'll contribute right away. Like, I think he'll defend right away. I think he'll make shots right away. I buy the defense and the shooting. But yeah, it's just interesting to like, what do they view him as primarily? Like a piece for this team right now, with, like, you know, with Trae and Jalen, say, right, like the main guys, and or do they really look at him as like a guy like just long term that is going to fit with however we decide to build out this team? And honestly, it's probably a little bit of both, and that's probably the appeal, is kind of that like optionality there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, that's why I said this draft was so weird, because a lot of people were split on who should be the number one guy. And it honestly just depended on who was the team at the top. And it happened to be the Hawks. And we could say, of course, the year we don't have a consensus number one, the Hawks get the number one pick, what kind of luck this team has, this franchise has. But that's why I think you had so many people split. I mean, you heard Klingon leading up. You heard, obviously, Sarr, like I said. I mean, we even heard from Woj 30 minutes for the draft that Reed Shepherd was under consideration for that pick. So, obviously, you know, that just tells you the type of draft class we had, where, you know, Landry came out and said shooting is a premium skill. That is something Risacher can do, is shoot the ball. And obviously and obviously his versatility defensively as well. So it's one of those things where it could end up working out for the Hawks. Obviously, I just want people to give him a chance, see what he can do, let him grow. Like you said, he's 19. Let him develop and see what his position ends up being, because they still maybe have some other moves they need to make, which leads me now into, you know, the big discussions that they're going to have. Obviously, we've heard Clint Capella in the market. DeAndre Hunter on the market. You're expecting maybe DJ Trae. We've heard rumor connections to that. I'll just start with guys like Clint and DeAndre. Just give me your assessment of those two guys in their market going forward in terms of, because there's been some teams that have been linked, especially to Capella, just about, do you think it's time for them both or one of the two to move on? Obviously with Onyeka waiting in the wings in terms of Capella, and should the Hawks be active? Should they be aggressive in trying to make a move?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think I'm fine with like largely running it back. But Capella and DeAndre are definitely like the first two that come to mind for me in terms of like trading, even more than Dejounte. Just like the Onyeka thing's been a little bit frustrating, like as an Onyeka fan, and I'm sure like a lot of Hawks fans can relate, but just the last few years, it's like, it's not like he hasn't been playing. Like he's had a solid role. He's gotten plenty of minutes and everything, but I have a hard time believing that, this coming season, Capella in his 30s now is going to be a better player overall than Onyeka is. Like, I don't know that he was this past season. Like, he obviously does some things really well. He's an outstanding rebounder, just an absolute beast on the boards. And I think he could help a lot of teams, but we're not going to really know what Double O can be until he's in that role of like primary center, starting center. Like, I just think you can only see so much off the bench, even if it's a very healthy dose of minutes off the bench. And I just think with what they want to be as a team at this point, he might be a better option. He can stretch out a little bit. Like, he's grown a lot as a shooter. I think 2 years ago, he really started to develop the mid-range. He was knocking those down. And then this past season, he started shooting threes. Like, he's got a little shot. He's got a little more versatility. He's athletic. I think he's a really fun fit with the other core guys. So, and Capella's on an expiring deal. Obviously, like, I don't think they're going to want to bring him back, long-term beyond that. So I think to just kind of, if you could get even just like some draft capital or something back for him, I think that's probably a good move. And then DeAndre's, he's interesting because like he's that same type of thing as Risacher in the sense that he's a forward he's a little smaller. I think he's probably closer to 6'6" or something. I'm not sure what he's listed at, but he can shoot the ball and he can defend. And when he's healthy, he's been pretty good. Will he ever live up to his draft slot? Probably not. But at this point, that doesn't really matter. Is he overpaid a little bit off that extension? Maybe a little bit, but when you're talking about the healthy version of that player, it's not the worst deal in the world. And I think it's tradable. I think there's a lot of teams that would be interested in a guy like that. And, I don't know that they have a logjam at forward, but it's like, depending on how far along Risacher is, how ready he is, you start thinking about who they're going to start. Like Jaylen obviously is locked in there. He's a monster. We can talk more about him later, but yeah, there's probably nobody higher on him than I am, honestly. And that's where it's like, if you're envisioning this Risacher Jaylen front court going forward or at the forward spots, maybe you look to move off DeAndre. But I think getting off either him or Clint, maybe not necessarily both. But the Clint one feels imminent. Whether it's now or like a little bit into the season or the deadline or something, just being on and expiring, I just think they're going to have to open up more opportunity for Onyeka. But then, then you probably need another big in that situation. They didn't draft one. So it's interesting.
Yeah. So it's interesting too, because I think, I've been in the camp where it's like, I've been ready for Onyeka to kind of take that next step too. It just, see what he can do. Obviously the last time we saw Onyeka before he was out for the year, he was a starter when Clint was out. And I think he was averaging like 17, 16 points a game. You could see the offense. You see the fluidity within the offense, just with his ability to score the ball, because he's a better offensive player than Clint is. But, and we'll have to see how that foot's doing, obviously, as the offseason continues. But the one thing I think Hawks fans have been debating with him too is Onyeka truly a center? I think some people, especially with him adding a bit of a shot, wonder, would he be better off at the 4 spot? And I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Do you think that's the case? Or do you think, listen, he may be an undersized center, but he's a center?
I I have this, I don't know, man. I don't know if it's always accurate, but I always say, like, if you're trying to decide whether a guy is a 4 or a 5, he's almost certainly a 5. Like, I think if you're even debating that, like in the modern NBA, he's probably best suited as a 5. Like, we could look at like Chet, for instance. Like, I think last summer that was a big discussion. Like, is he going to be a 4 or a 5? And I think it's pretty clear that he's best suited as a 5. And there's been quite a few examples of that. That's what I see Onyeka as, especially on a team with the length that the Hawks are kind of building here. Like when you look at Jalen at 6'9", playmaking forward, and then Risacher might even be taller than him. Like, I don't know what they're going to list him at, but I think he's 6'10" in shoes anyway. So you've got all this length, and then especially if you do trade like a Dejounte, say, like, I think they would probably look to bring in somebody who can do some of that secondary playmaking that they wanted out of Dejounte and have indeed gotten, but somebody with a little more size, so you don't have that really undersized backcourt. I just think I think a lot of it all comes back to Trae, with what you need to put around him to sort of defensively to make that viable and everything. And it kind of seems like they're going in that direction of just more length. So yeah, that's probably where I'm at there.
Yeah, I got you for sure, man. Like, it's just an interesting debate because people bring it up because I think there were times last year where the Hawks used Okongwu on the floor and Okongwu played 4. So people were like, well, maybe he's better suited for that. But, I think maybe that just shows to his versatility more than anything.
Yeah,
but
it's not like he can't. It's not like he can't play it, right? Like, but I just think I don't know. I personally just want to see him as the starting center, going forward. I just with Jalen at the 4 probably. That's kind of, I think that's a nice look. But again, if they move off Clint, like they're gonna need more. I mean, I know they've got Mogay, but I think they would need probably to bring in another big, maybe in free agency or something. So
yeah, definitely. And I think too, the numbers when Jalen and Okongwu played together were positive. They had a positive net rating. So you have a sample size that says, I mean, it was good. It wasn't a bad 2-man duo right there in your front court. So maybe that's something the Hawks can look at when making that evaluation. But like you said, you mentioned, it's all about Trae, how that impacts him, and even DJ as well. I'm going to start with DJ first. Obviously, he's been a guy who, I mean, he had a career highs this year, playing out of position. He's a point guard by trade, but he's playing 2 with Trae. He's a guy who we know what type of elite mid-range game, hit clutch shots. He can do a lot of things. But, with the backcourt as a whole, there is a question if it works, especially with the last 2 seasons of results. So I wanted you to let me know your thoughts on Dejounte overall. And do you think he should be the one that out of the 2 that they aggressively maybe try to move if that is indeed the direction they go in?
Yeah, I'm more in favor of moving Dejounte and just holding on to Trae. I mean, Trae is a special offensive engine. And I really think it's on the Hawks, on their front office, on Quinn Snyder and his staff to make it work around Trae, because Trae's got his deficiencies defensively, his size, but like, you've got to make it work around him because he's such a special offensive player. And I don't think they've really done that up until this point. I mean, you could certainly look at the conference finals run, but like, as far as the Dejounte Trae pairing, I mean, it's been underwhelming. I don't think there's any other way to really see it. Like, I don't think Dejounte is like, if you're just like building your dream team around Trae, like, I don't think Dejounte is like your 2 guard right there, right? Like, maybe you want somebody who's bigger and a better shooter. And like, Dejounte's defense is good, but it's not like quite, I don't think, been as it was billed coming in, where like he was all defense and everything. It's good though, but like, I don't think he's the type of player you want there. He's a good player. I think it can work to an extent. I think it has at times. I'm not going to say it's been a disaster, but I don't think it's a great fit. And he's got a nice contract. Like, it's a very, very good tradable contract. Like, I think they could get good value back for him, and not just picks. Like I think they could get some players back for him, and you've still got Bogdanovich, can obviously play the two. Risacher might end up, who knows? Like he could be like a jumbo two guard. I'm not sure. We'll see. We'll figure that out. But like, where are you at with Kobe Buffkin? Like, is he ready to make a jump? Because getting rid of Dejounte could really open up some opportunity for him. I know he did not play much as a rookie, but I was very encouraged by what I saw in the minutes that he did play with his scoring ability, some of the playmaking potential. Like he's a really intriguing player. So they're kind of at this place where like you've got some exciting young players that you want to develop, obviously, and give opportunity to, but also you want to win. So they're just one of those teams that's kind of trying to do both, I think. But if you can get a guy like Kobe to really be like the primary backup guard or the primary backup point guard and do well in that role and contribute to winning, like I think there's an argument for moving off Dejounte to open up things like that for guys who might fit better next to Trae, because he's not an ideal fit. So that's just where I'm at with it. Very good player. I'm glad you mentioned the clutch stuff, because he hit at least like 3 game winners just last season alone. He's that dude. He's a very good player, but I don't think he's a 2 guard, and I don't think he's a great fit next to Trae and what they're trying to do.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, that's been the biggest thing the Hawks front office has been having to figure out if is it some way we can formulate the roster a certain way, or is it just something that's not working? Like I said, the numbers have not necessarily shown that it's worked. So we're going to have to see if that is something they end up doing. Now, speaking of Trae, this offseason has been really interesting for him because there's been so many rumors that like people are making it seem like he's the one the Hawks win. People are saying Trae's the one they're going to move because they get the most picks back, things of that nature. I've kind of been like, I don't think Trae wants to, like, to me, I've never gotten a feeling that he wants to leave. He just wants to make sure that the team is trying to be competitive and compete. That's all he really wants to know. Is that still the goal? And so, and then you're hearing like DJ, obviously with a better contract, has more value than Trae. And it's like, oh, the Hawks are stuck with him. So my question to you is, why is it, do you think Trae has this rep in the league? It feels like from the All-Star stub when he was second in fan voting and still didn't get in until someone got hurt, from just everybody trying to say Trae's gone, is that, people think maybe that's this national media trying to, push an agenda. Just what are your thoughts on Trae Young? Because you already mentioned a little bit, you think he's a special offensive guy. Just about him and maybe the perception he has around the league.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I don't know if Trae has ever been talked about fairly, like since he came into the league. I really think that Luka trade just like set him off on the wrong foot. And he's, he struggled a little bit at summer league that year. I remember I was there, and it was like, it was pretty rough a couple of those games. I just feel like just from the jump, like, I don't know, it's almost like no matter what he does, there was the conference finals run, like he was getting respect and everything then, but it's just like people are quick to forget. And when you look at the numbers he puts up and what he's like, they were the number 2 offense in the league under Nate McMillan in 21-22. Like that's him. He's a walking top 5 offense, like all day with the right pieces around him, I think. And I think people probably focus too much on the defensive struggles. Like I really just, and I don't think it's even just Trae. I really think this is kind of the discourse in general, just being on like Twitter for a couple years now. I've noticed like people just will talk endlessly about something a guy doesn't do well and like almost never about what they do well. And with Trae, it's like pretty extreme on both ends of that. Like, yeah, he's probably one of the worst defensive players. He tries. I think he's gotten better. He makes some good plays. He's smart. He's got good quick hands and everything. But like, in the NBA, if you're that size, you can only be so good defensively. So it's not even like, it's not like he's not trying, because he does. But still, he's I don't know how to put it. Like he's in the bottom tier probably defensively among NBA starters, right? But he's so good offensively. Like there's almost nobody that's been able to operate at his level. Like his pick and roll game, his float game, like his passing, like he's an all-time great passer, the shooting range, the confidence, just all that, man. Like he's shown that he can lead a team like deep into the playoffs. He's fearless. And I just don't think that positive stuff gets talked about enough, just in general, compared to some of the negative stuff. So he's kind of got this reputation as like a good stats, bad team guy, they call it, who doesn't play defense. And it's like, no. Like, that's not it. Like, I don't blame him solely, certainly, for, this past season and the season before, the play-in seasons, yeah, I just think the way he's talked about is a little unfair. I think he's a really special player. And again, like they gotta make this work around him, because you don't get a Trae Young, every day. Like I'm not gonna call him a generational player, but he's rare in the history of basketball. There haven't been many guys like him offensively. He's almost like in that Steve Nash offensive engine conversation. So you got to build a defense a good defense around him, so you pretty much have to surround him with good defenders. You got to put sufficient shooting around him. He's got to have his lob threat, which he has had. And he needs a secondary playmaker probably that can take a little pressure off him. And Dejounte's done it to an extent. I think they could maybe it could be Jalen, or maybe they'll bring in somebody else. But
yeah, I mean, I think too, when you mention about people having, focusing on the negative too, I think sometimes just when you don't like a player, you just, as natural humans, we just kind of, every time they do something bad, we're like, this is a chance to say, see, they're not good. That's just how people are. You make a judgment on a player and you just have your opinion. If you love a guy, you're more likely going to be more forgiving when he has bad performances. And if you hate a guy, you're going to be less forgiving when he has bad performances, and vice versa. So I think, with Trae, he's done a lot for Atlanta. I've said he's the first big franchise player we've had since Dominique, and that's not something like you say you can get every day. People talk about trading Trae, but then I'm like, who's your franchise guy? It could be Jalen, but we don't know if Jalen's we don't know if he's ready yet. And you're asking him to potentially be that, or I guess DJ, which, I mean, it just depends on how you feel about him as a player. But going back to Jalen, obviously, like I said, you were a guy who has been big on Jalen last year when he was going into his first full season, being in the rotation and becoming a starter. Can you just talk about his growth to you and what your expectations are going to be going into now his fourth year in the league, where, we've seen the passing, we've seen the athleticism, obviously the ankle injuries, those are, you kind of look at those maybe as fluke injuries, because it's not like he's just not durable. It's like, okay, well, anybody can land wrong. You can walk down the stairs and land wrong, and it messes you up. So can you just talk about Jalen Johnson, man, since, I know you really follow his game?
Yeah, no, I mean, he really is definitely one of my favorite players. I was a little bit familiar with him coming out, entering the league, coming out of Duke. Like I knew about him. But then actually after seeing him, like just even in limited minutes his rookie year, it's like he's one of those guys that just jumps off the screen. He's so big, like, and I mean, like just a great frame, great length. And then you put insane athleticism on top of that. And then he can handle the ball and pass. Like he's really like a point forward. But he's just got this monster frame, and just a phenomenal transition player. You want to talk about improvements, like shooting is obviously a big one for him. He's improved as a 3-point shooter. He's developed a nice little mid-range jumper. And just, I think, just kind of learning the NBA game, that may have taken a couple years as well to sort of get to that point where like he's really comfortable out there. But, we saw it this year. Like, I think if he had qualified, if he had been eligible, he may have won most improved. He certainly would have been my pick. And I've heard people who actually have votes say the same thing. So like, that's the kind of jump he made. Like he doubled his numbers pretty much, I think, across the board. I mean, he's untouchable. I think we probably both agree, and is seen as a building block going forward. Like, I think I think we're more excited about him probably than Risacher. I think I think a lot of Hawks fans probably are. I think people just in general NBA fans kind of like, because he's so young. Still, was he 22? So like, where would he probably would have been the first pick in this draft. And we've seen what he can do at the NBA level. I mean, he just had an outstanding season. So just the versatility plus athleticism plus size and playmaking, like a guy that can be a lockdown defender, a defensive playmaker, and then offer you that same kind of versatility on the other end. Like he could probably guard 1 through 5 pretty much, and probably pretty much play 1 through 5, or at least function 1 through 5 on a short-term basis on the other end. And there's just not very many guys like ever that you can say that about, let alone with his level of athleticism, 6'9" with a 7-foot wingspan. So he's obviously eligible for an extension. That's going to be something to watch this offseason. I don't think there's any doubt they're going to give him one. But like, just in terms of the money, what we're looking at there, because that's going to be, I think the best comps for him are probably like Vassell and McDaniels from last year. They were like 130, between 130 and 140. I think, is he in that range? Because I think he's that level of player. Like, I'd put him right there with Vassell and McDaniels. Now, I like both of those guys a lot, but like, I just think a lot of people always, if you don't pay attention to a certain player or the team super closely, you might be like a little bit behind on just how good this guy's looking and like how much the team probably values him. So whatever the number is, it might catch some more casual people like off guard. But he's going to get paid and deservedly so. He's fantastic. So, and look, man, to go back to Risacher, like the thought of the two of them together makes a lot of sense, because the knock on Risacher, right, is like creation, right? Like self-creation, creation off the bounce. Like he's not doing that right now or anytime soon. Most likely he's more of like an off-ball mover, a shooter, all that. And that's like less of a detriment. Like when you have another forward like Jaylen, who's has so much ability as a playmaker and a ball handler, like maybe that's kind of what they're thinking. But those two to me make a lot of sense as a forward pairing going forward. And it's very exciting to think about that, because Jaylen, while he's improved as a shooter, it's not his strength just yet. And Risacher is a great shooter, but playmaking is kind of his, or creation even just in general is his kind of weakness that keeps being talked about. And that's where Jaylen, I think, can excel. So they make a lot of sense to me together.
Yeah. And I think too, I was also big on the Jaylen Johnson crowd, especially when Nate was last year. I was like, oh, why is he not playing more? He needs more minutes. And then Quinn gave him minutes. We saw, and I said the Jaylen's that type of guy where if you didn't, let's say you were a casual, watch the Hawks for the first time, and they said pick out a guy who you think is like a star or a really good player. I feel like Jaylen just gives off that energy of like, yeah, he's one of the best players on the floor, because he just gives off. I always say he provides something I think the Hawks sometimes don't have, which is like juice. I think Jalen Johnson provides juice. And I think that's why people are so excited for him and what he can become and why he's considered an untouchable. Because of that. Because of his feeling, what he can become, people are trying to figure out, is it possible for him to become a superstar? Is he just going to be a star? Like, people are trying to figure out how high this ceiling is.
For what it's worth, I think the sky's the limit for him. Like, if you told me he's a bona fide superstar 5 years down the road, 4 years down the road from now, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think he's pretty much established. I'll be surprised if he's not all-star caliber from here on out. I don't know how many all-star teams he'll actually make, but like, I would think multiple. But like, I think he'll be at that level at the very least, because he was pretty close to it. Like, he was awesome, man. And he'll get more recognition as the Hawks get better and stuff. And he missed a lot of time like that. That's one thing that I don't think probably gets talked about quite enough. Like, if you're looking at this Hawks team, like, they did have a fair amount of injuries last year. And like, every team does have injuries, but like, they weren't one of the healthier teams in the league. And I do think that hurt them, where like their record, they might have still been right around 500 no matter what. But I think they would have been a little better than they were had he not missed that chunk of time. And obviously Trae missed time, and DeAndre Hunter, I'm sure, missed 20 games. Like, so yeah, they, that's big things for Jaylen though next season. But he kind of might have missed his MIP window because he you know what I mean? Like, because even if he averages 20 and 10 next year, it's like that's not a huge improvement because he was already so good, but he wasn't eligible. So, but that's all right. That's just an award. The real ones know he was the real MIP last year.
Yes, sir. MIP Jalen Johnson. I get it, bro. Yeah. Look, Jalen, someone who's really, I think people are really excited about and excited to see his growth in year 4. I know he's working on his game. I know we've seen some Instagram stories of him working on his game, and that just shows you the dedication he has and everything like that. And they'll have to work a contract. He has clutch. So I know people don't like clutch the most, but, at the end of the day, clutch does represent usually a lot of big-time players, they feel like. So that shows that Jalen Johnson is considered that. But, Brett, I appreciate you, man, coming on to the show, man, talking some Hawks with me for show, man. Let people know where they can find you.
You can just find me on the app formerly known as Twitter at Usher NBA. USHER, like the singer, NBA. But yeah, no, you just throw me a follow on there and hit me up. And just love to talk hoops with people. So that's where I'm at primarily these days. Probably where you first saw me at too. So, but yeah, thank you, Bryce. I'd love to come back anytime and talk Hawks. I try to follow the whole league. Hawks are a team that I follow a little more closely than most. Like I wouldn't call myself a Hawks fan, but I do the Jalen Johnson thing, and I'm always going to be a Trae fan and all that. So I do follow the Hawks quite a bit, and it's great to like finally get to talk about them on a podcast. So I appreciate you giving me the opportunity, man.
Yes, sir, man. Glad to have you on, man. Always good to talk about Hawks, man. Especially, media doesn't always respect the Hawks. So it's always good if we can get some Hawks conversation, Hawks chatter going. It's definitely a good thing for show. But guys, you already know where to find me, Bryce_2K on Twitter or all across social media. If you want to look for the podcast on YouTube as well, just go and type in Believe in Hawks. Unless you're watching, if you're watching it right now, but tell your friends. And then also, if you watch this for audio, you rating, you review, show some love to the pod, man. Let me know what y'all think about Brett. You know what I'm saying? So, what we're going to keep doing with the Hawks having a big week coming up. We're about to hit the real, I would say, fast track of this offseason for this team with big decisions looming. Landry Fields under the spotlight for what this team's going to be as they try to figure out how they're going to maneuver and try to improve, or if they do decide to rebuild next year. But that's Brett. I'm Bryce. See you next time.